my name's Heather and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I make videos about politics, mostly about the shameless weaponization of anti-Semitism against the left in the UK. And this video is a little bit different because it's kind of when the weaponization of something or other gets beyond anti-Semitism, or the weaponization of anti-Semitism goes on overdrive and starts attacking people who are part of that weaponization. Anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm really happy to have on a guest. First time on my channel, Daniel Taylor.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and it's a little bit surreal because normally I'm on your channel and we're doing a kind of podcast called Complaints in a Podcast.
Yeah, it's about time that you reciprocated, I felt.
Yeah.
Inviting you on so often, and now you finally got me on your channel. So thank you very much for that.
Right, that's a nice...
I feel like I have to be very polite on your channel. It's a very different vibe.
That was you being polite, was it?
Well, okay, I don't. It's the closest you'll get, I guess.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I want to have Daniel on to discuss this particular issue, which is the investigation of Neal Lawson, who is director of a progressive think tank, Compass, by the Labour Party, is because I think at this point, everything that's going on and the whole witch hunt and the purge has become so absurd, and we need humour to really discuss it effectively, and I'm not funny, and Daniel is.
All right, great, no pressure on that.
So let's just kick off by saying that we're going to be talking about what's happened, how the media is covering it, how even as Neal is under attack, he's attacking the left, and what could be going on around that, and what the wider significance is. And it's maybe a bit weird to be covering that now because, you know, this week we've got the assault on Jenin by Israel, with 10 people murdered by Israeli military, with thousands injured, and we have in Parliament the Anti-boycott, divestment and sanctions bill. But this all kind of joins up together, I think.
Do you want to talk about that, how they're linked? I feel like one of the things is that what you're saying now is something that someone like Neal Lawson might be very clueless to, how this all links up. I don't know if you want to go in that direction to begin
That's
with.
a good point. Do you want to say a bit more about that before we get on to what his crime is and how he's responded to it?
Yeah, so I don't know too much about this person, to be honest with you, although I've learned a lot in the last weeks when he's suddenly become the sort of target of the witch hunt, yeah. But I think, you know, with someone like him, the way that he talks about it is that people that have been targeted in the past, I guess that would include yourself, right, who've been expelled from the Labour Party or actioned by the Labour Party for something around anti-Semitism or supporting other people who have it's claimed have made anti-Semitic remarks, whatever the sort of extracted thing that you've been attacked for. He would see that that was right to do that, that there was some issue with that. And it was something to do with bringing the party into disrepute or actually being anti-Semitic. It's some sort of bad thing that the Labour Party are catching you out on for doing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's all fine and dandy as far as he's concerned, and there's no political motivation behind it. But now that it's happened to him, there must be some sort of error in the system, right? Something's gone wrong because he isn't a racist. He isn't somebody who's like, I don't know, as he describes it, hard left or ideologically driven. I mean, I don't know. In some ways, it's never fully explained what all of these people have in common and why they should be driven out, apart from maybe that they're politically different. But obviously, it's not just the political difference, because that would be okay. It's something about that political difference being wrong in and of itself, being an extremist position.
Yeah, being illegitimate, right?
Illegitimate, yeah, I guess that's the best word for it. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I just thought that's an interesting, you're already linking it to a wider political, I guess, sort of movement towards sort of getting policies through, right, for various organizations that are pushing for various policies all the time, policy positions in government, in the Labour Party. Like it's linked to that. And he doesn't see that at all.
Yeah, and actually he wrote an article some time ago now, which we'll link to, he wrote a couple of things about anti-Semitism crisis. And one of them he says, yeah, it's been weaponized against Corbyn. And then he has a but, and the but is the bit which you're talking about, which is that Corbyn and some on the left, to quote him, must take their share of the blame in the far reaches of the party, which is just like really an awful phrase. It's like somehow we're in the extremes and we're in the kind of hidden bits. Makes us sound very murky. Have now entered the more mainstream with his victory. Some have worryingly blurred the lines between hostility to Israel and the plight of the Palestinians and anti-Semitism. And he talks about the wide left tendency to believe that the failure of socialism could be down to the betrayal of the likes of the bankers, and it's how it plays to anti-Jewish tropes, and how the leadership failed to act on these issues. And another thing which came out since he's been, as you say, in the limelight or in the spotlight, whatever it is, headlights, I guess. He's in the headlights, really. It's more of the metaphor. Is that in January, he apparently invited Tony Lerman on the Compass podcast to talk about his book, Whatever Happened to Anti-Semitism. And then Tony waited for details and heard nothing. And then he was told that he'd been disinvited because Neal Lawson thought he was too polarizing and lacking in nuance. And that's a really outrageous thing, because Tony was hounded out of his job because of smears like the smears and the attacks which are being made on Neal Lawson. And instead of being able to look beyond that, he just bought into them and said, yeah, you're polarizing. I mean, we could say Neal Lawson's polarizing. He is at the moment, right?
Yeah, so just staying with Neal Lawson, what is the he's polarizing now, you're saying. What's the actual sort of positions that people have come out with, right? Because obviously he's been actioned by the Labour Party, and he shared his letter. Or he hasn't shared his letter because
he went public, which is a little bit of a kind of weird thing to do, right? Because it's like, I'm not going to be naughty and share my letter. I'm going to go public. Like, there's a difference between those.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you did, but you shared the letter.
Yeah.
But either way, you can't do that, right? He's already gone against what the Labour Party is saying. But his argument was something like he doesn't want this all to be decided in some darkened room in Labour's head office, which is what the Labour Party expects you to do about it. And what in the past, anybody who's broken it, who's come public has been penalized for that. Has he said anything about those people? It's really odd that his framing of it, when it's happened to him, his framing is so much more darker and sinister. But it's the same people. It's the same Labour HQ. It's the same NEC that's done this to everybody else. But for him, it's such an odd framing that he has to come public, because in this situation, it's very different, and the people need to know about this grievous error that the Labour Party have conducted. Yeah,
so maybe we should say what his crime is, and then look at that kind of pattern, because that pattern goes beyond him, doesn't it? So he's been his crime is...
We only know what he is claiming the crime is, right? Is that right?
That's true, yes.
Yeah, because I've heard some different accounts of what it might be.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Let me tell people what it is, and then you tell me those accounts. So he is being investigated. This is to quote the New Statesman, because he quote tweeted. So quote tweeting, for people not on Twitter, is when you take something which has been posted and you post above it, adding a comment. And it was a tweet by a Liberal Democrat MP about her cooperation with the Green Party. And Neal Lawson called it proper grown-up progressive politics. So what have you heard? What rumours have you heard?
Well, one of the things is that Compass organised a sort of, not a lecture, but discussion with Martin Ford on the Ford report, which sort of established more publicly the hierarchy of racism argument, which is sort of broken through into the mainstream discussion around what happened in the Labour Party. I know that you've got your critique of that, and I do as well, but it certainly muddied the conversation in a way that before pretty much the sort of standard, I guess, Starmerite or sort of anti-Corbyn position was very clear, and any kind of pushback against that was seen as conspiratorial or not unlegitimate, illegitimate, right?
Yeah.
But now this argument has been allowed to, because of Martin Ford and because of that report and things like Compass doing things around it, it's got a bit of traction, a little bit of legitimacy. So I imagine that's quite damaging to the Labour top bods. But there was also something about him, something about Luke Akehurst, a personal vendetta of Luke Akehurst, running for some sort of position and not getting it, running against Lawson. I've heard all sorts of things. Because the thing about it is it's such a weak argument for why would you get rid of Neal Lawson for this tweet? You know it's going to cause some sort of hoo-ha. Like, okay, that's officially what's on the piece of paper, as far as we know from Lawson.
Yeah.
But it's like, who was it on Twitter said, posted next to that, when Tony Blair did exactly the same thing. And are they going to get rid of Tony Blair? I mean, maybe. I wouldn't put it past them.
I mean, that's really interesting, because I think you're right that probably what's on the letter is what he's saying, but the reasons why people are purged or attacked or investigated are really complicated and are sometimes to do with things that can't be written down, like the Ford thing, which couldn't be given legitimately as a reason, or personal revenge. And I think we know that in individual cases. I personally think that I pissed off people locally and someone phoned up someone. So the things which were written down were not per se the motivation. Other people have said things that are worse than what I've said. I've said things that are worse than what was on my investigation letter. In some sense, they just need something. And this is an interesting one, because if it can be justified that this is advocating voting for a rival party, it's an auto expulsion. There's no real process at all. I mean, the process is always crap, but it's particularly crap in cases of voting for, supporting another party, not voting for, but supporting. So I think that it's an easy one. I wouldn't be surprised if Luke Akehurst and others, or other people who feel personally aggrieved by him, put in a complaint. And it's the arbitrariness means anybody can be attacked. This is really something which no one is safe from. I suppose that's what it underlines. Yeah,
I was going to ask you, where are we now? Because he seemed to claim that he'd been expelled or was going to be expelled, but it's actually he's just under investigation. As you say, like following the rules, it should be an auto. But that's saying that he's they have to then have said, well, this does mean that you support another party. They can just say, oh, actually, it's just a nice thing to say. It's not about supporting another party per se. It's more just a sort of compass line on maybe where they want Labour to go would be. I don't know, what's that mean? Like, if you like a policy of another party and you say, oh, I wish Labour would adopt this policy, is that supporting the other party? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, he was very clever in the way he worded it. He said, Labour are expelling me, which I think is just about true but misleading, because in every case of something that's like this, it doesn't usually take very long, because I don't think they have to have the panel in quite the same way they do for a notice of investigation like mine. We haven't seen the letter, so it's not that clear. But an auto expulsion is usually rapid. So it's not technically untrue, but it is misleading because it isn't done and dusted yet. And certainly people like me and people like Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi and others are much more careful with what we say about the status of our cases, so we can't be accused of misleading people. There has been an outcry, so they could use it to appear reasonable. They could say, well, we won't expel him, and therefore we can show that it's not a purge.
Well, I mean, I've heard that they may walk it back because people in Labour quite high up are stepping in on his behalf. Obviously, they wouldn't have any bearing on the case. They may walk the case back arbitrarily of powerful people stepping in and supporting him.
Yeah, it's nice that they saw that important people stepped in and helped the rest of us out, right? I think what could have happened if they had. That's the question. Think what could have happened if, right from the start, powerful people have stepped in.
What, and supported? Yeah, well, yeah. What, from the start of Corbyn leadership?
Yes. Well, yeah, but they're never going to do that, were they?
What would have happened, right, if Corbyn had become leader and Tony Blair and I know even Gordon Brown, Peter Mandelson were like, this is a really beautiful fresh start. I'm loving the energy, the vibrancy, all these new members. This is great. Labour are going to win. I don't know what would have happened then. To me, the funny thing is, in a way, it would have sucked a bit of the energy out of it. A lot of it was about sort of trying to get rid of the sort of dead wood of the Blair government and all the toxicity around that. So there is a complicated relationship. Obviously, Labour Party is a complete mess.
True. So those distinctions that we're talking about, the fact that he doesn't merit this and other people do, that's all over the coverage, right? So that's
confirmed. Yeah, that's confirmed by all of the media.
Yeah,
sort of mainstream media reporting of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Guardian editorial which starts off, I think, with the lines, Mr. Lawson is no left-winger, some of whom are being purged by Sir Keir Starmer on ideological grounds. It's like, it's nice that we can be open about the fact that people are being purged now. Like, that was something we had to fight to acknowledge, and suddenly it's just like taken for granted.
So what is the point here? That actually it's got nothing to do with breaking the rules. It's about who you are as an individual and the politics that you stand for.
Yeah.
Because he's broken a rule that other people have been penalized for, expelled for.
Yeah.
I'm thinking actually, not that this proves my point at all, but isn't that what Alistair Campbell went for?
Yeah, I mean, he said he voted for the Lib Dems. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that is a stronger argument, but like, there have been people that have who was it that said they liked Nicola Sturgeon's hat or something, or like get well soon Nicola Sturgeon or something like that, right?
Yeah,
and they were expelled.
I think they were blocked from being a candidate, but maybe.
I mean, blocked from being a candidate, right?
Yeah, the interesting one happened under Corbyn. Actually, there was Jeremy Hunt's constituency. The local Labour Party was like, "There's no point in us putting up a candidate." And what we've got here is a really great national health. What was the National Health Party called? Anyway, that party put up a really good candidate, and they wanted to try to run on the NHS as a united opposition against Jeremy Hunt and unseat him. And I think 2 or 3 exec members in that constituency party were expelled.
Well, for supporting that.
For just putting that forward, to saying that's what we should do as a constituency. So this is really a valid reason, more than the shit that I was expelled for, to be honest, and more than prescription applied retroactively. This has a long history in the Labour Party because we work in a system for good and ill that is competitive in terms of our political parties.
It makes me think of 2 things, right? So one is, right, he is he's in this position and he's fighting back by linking it to a narrative, which actually it's not so clear that it is linked to, right? So he's saying that there is a purge of left-wing members, and that's justified. And what's the implication there? That they wouldn't be purged under a different leadership. So it's not particularly to do with rules. It's to do with them wanting to purge certain people with a certain political belief within the party. He's sort of claiming that's happening, and that he's been brought into this by accident, unnecessarily, or in some way. Firstly, that is just totally delegitimizes the Labour leadership's. Well, it sort of accuses them of what the left have been saying for ages, right? But secondly, like, what he's actually been penalised for is just generally Labour's hard line on any kind of support for other parties, which, I think they have always been like that, and that's one of the big problems as he well knows, being from Compass with British politics, is you have these two parties and they tend to destroy, crush, or at the, very best kind of bring in any kind of other movement. So yeah, it's there's a really interesting conversation to be had there, but I don't know if it's going to be had in the mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly the support for parties to the left is particularly what he's being punished for. Lib Dems, I wouldn't say whether they are to the left of Labour or not. It's a bit complicated, but the Greens definitely are. And he was advocating in this tweet support for an alliance with the Greens. And there's the Labour Party is coming down really hard on that. So there's a council, Stroud Council, where Labour was leading the opposition. It had 15 councillors, and the national executive said, you can't carry on being in alliance with the Greens and the Lib Dems there. And that would have meant the Tories running the council as the biggest party. And so 9 out of the 15 of them have quit because they want to carry on running the council in the way that the people who voted for them wanted, which is not to support the Tories. So there's been a real pernicious attack on alliances with the SNP particularly, and the Greens, who are both perceived as to the left. And also the welcoming in of Tories, the welcoming back of Luciana Berger, people who left to go to the right of Labour, and people who are to the right of Labour and are coming in. So it's very complicated, right?
Yeah. So wait, so let's go back to Neal Lawson's argument here. So the problem isn't that he broke the rules. He undoubtedly did, in this very sort of strict rule that Labour has about mentioning other parties. Because he's not arguing that that's not the case, right?
He's arguing it's not support for another party.
Okay.
On the technicality.
People for almost identical tweets that have been actioned, whether it's expelled or blocked from running. They've had the Labour Party have seen it as support and used it against them, right?
Yes.
So, and he's not come out in support of those people, saying that was unjust.
No, he has a little bit of a problem with solidarity.
Yeah. Has he learned anything in the last few weeks? Has he now retrospectively, having experienced this myself, I've suddenly come to the realization that actually it was a bit wrong when they blocked all of those candidates, like Jeremy Driscoll, who we might come on to later, right? He hasn't done any of that, presumably, right? So he's not really arguing that this particular rule can't apply to this particular type of tweet in other circumstances. It just doesn't apply to me. And the reason it doesn't apply to me is because I am not of the hard left, right? I am actually of the soft left / right wing, sort of Luciana Berger's people who should get away with whatever they want. I mean, this is the argument, right? When I make a tweet like this, I'm coming from a soft left position, and because of that ideology, that should protect me, because I'm the sort of person you want in the Labour Party. But nothing to do with rules. It's about good people that should be in the Labour Party, and this is what Keir Starmer should want the Labour Party to be. It should be people like me. So he shouldn't kick me out for these petty little things. But he should use those petty little things to kick out other people. We grant him, like, it's hard to get that across, in our Twitter.
Well, it's actually not so hard. The New Statesman article is my favourite encapsulation of his argument. So I'm just going to say a few bits from that, because this one, they do an interview with him, and it's like, it's just really so annoying. It's so, like, it is gaslighting to read the shit. So they say, I quote Lawson, "It feels odd, it feels incredibly disappointing." And the person writing this interview, can't remember who it was, who gives a fuck, right? They're all interchangeable, those New Statesman centrists. "I met him in his mid-century decorated flat beside the River Thames. He wore a smart black polo fringed with red and white stripes and thick-rimmed glasses. A copy of Daniel Chandler's Free and Equal lay on the table." I mean, like, the humanizing that happens through this, and the really contrasts with the dehumanizing that happens of people like, Jackie Walker, and, all the people who've been purged, including all the people in Jewish Voice for Labour. They're constructed as just, we're constructed as freaks. No one describes what we're wearing or what we're reading or what our homes look like. It's just to make a distinction, right? And it carries on. "Lawson has been a member of the Labour Party for 44 years. He's no raging Trotskyite, embittered Corbynista, or wailing extremist. He even describes himself as a former member of the Labour establishment. To quote him, "I'm not the hard left. I've never been of the hard left," he said. He wrote speeches for Gordon Brown. He frequently offers advice to Keir Starmer, and he worked for Peter Mandelson during the 1997 election campaign. And it talks about his eyes moistening as he speaks about his history.
Well, it sounds like he's a bit emotionally unstable. That's why he needs to be kicked out. I mean, because you would put that, he sounds like the sort of frothing at the mouth, like emotionally unstable, like mob that would take over like Haringey Council in a meeting, you know, and start screaming and shouting about socialism. That's what he sounds like to me.
Right. Well, let's get rid of him, yeah.
Yeah, let's get rid of him, exactly. Yeah, but that's the thing, like it's what does it matter that he's not a hard left, that he's not this or that? What's that got to do with breaking the rules?
Yeah, so it feels to me like, and there are other examples of this, there are some people who in the moment they get accused, their go-to instinct, and I'm not saying it's conscious, I don't know whether it's conscious, but their go-to instinct is to betray other people. And it's almost like they've internalized the dynamic of the witch hunt so much. They remember, you know, what happened in McCarthyism. The way you got out of McCarthyism, the way you escape the consequences is to name names. And they're not naming names per se, but they are, you know, they are betraying people. It's pretty much the same thing. And there's no guarantees like there was with McCarthyism that you'll keep your work and keep your nice house with your swimming pools in Hollywood or whatever else is going on. It's just that they feel like that's what they've got to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, you mean like it doesn't really make any difference whether he says that or not, but it's just good to throw in the hard left, that I'm not hard left.
Yeah, it feels like he thinks it might make a difference because that it has made a difference in the past in the same kind of system. And it's almost an admission that is a witch hunt, if that's where your instincts go when you're accused.
We kind of said that earlier, right? Because the logic is that he shouldn't be penalized for this tweet, but others should.
Yeah.
It's not based on what you've actually said. It's based on other things, right? It's not based on the evidence that is given to you for why you're breaking the rules. There is an external extra kind of issue that means that you should be penalized and another person shouldn't be, which is to do with, presumably, I mean, you know, a best case scenario is to do with your political outlook. I mean, you know, it could be anything. It could be racist, could be, you know, but I mean, like, obviously we would say that it's, I mean, it's clearly for us, it is a political position. If you look at the people that are generally kicked out up until recently, as it's sort of spread, although always it's been that way. It sort of started with people that took a very public hard line on what was happening in the Labour Party, and it spread to anyone who supported them or anyone who's ever met them. So it has sort of spread out like that, which is obviously going to move away from a particular political position to other people who have, I just say, like soft left political positions, but you end up sharing platforms or some kind of political opinions as these people, and therefore you may have retweeted them, etc. It's so arbitrary. Yes, you can make that argument if you want to, but you're not going to make it when it doesn't suit you, when it affects somebody that you like. You're only going to use it when it affects someone that you don't like. And Lawson's big beef is that he thought he was liked, and he isn't as liked as he thought he was.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot more sympathy for Jamie Driscoll than I do for Neal Lawson. But there was the same kind of weirdness that happened with him that he kind of said in those early interviews where he was defending himself, like, you know, I accepted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism in the authority local government which I lead. I did the Jewish labor movement training. He said, you know,
you
there's
could
nothing.
Flip it though and say, like, I swallowed all of your bullshit, you know.
Yeah.
I ate a lot of shit for this, and now you're turning around on me after all I've done.
It's weird as you're right, because so I'm going to read what he said on the Owen Jones podcast, because I think it's interesting. And it's interesting to say, well, what is he saying here? What's motivating that? So he says he hasn't done anything wrong, he says. He says, what has happened in the Labour Party is undoubtedly there have been a lot of people who've been very, very clumsy and quite offensive in the way that they have conflated the criticism of the state of Israel. And he says, I think the murder of innocent civilians has definitely happened, and continues, but they've conflated that very careless language, possibly at times willfully provocative language. Like there's anything wrong with willfully provocative language, but anyway, and blamed it on Jewish people in general, which is anti-Semitism. So he summarizes, let's not say there's no anti-Semitism here. So yeah, is that, I bet, a lot of shit to be here, or is that betrayal, like, or is that confusion? I don't know.
Yeah, I accepted the IHRA definition. Surely he accepted it because it's a really good definition. What does that have to do with anything else? Like, he did it because it's the right thing to do. You know, it's a very, there's a very sort of unspoken meta argument going on all the time with this stuff.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, you're right. It's contradicting itself, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, what's that? Yeah, what's that got to do with? What is he saying? I don't know. It'd be great to have someone on who actually wanted to interview him about this thing. The issue with all of this, and I to be honest, I haven't seen the Owen Jones interview, and we've spoken about this many times. What keeps coming up with all of these things, even with Owen Jones and more left-wing platforms, is the avoidance of actually discussing the witch hunt, even to the point of, is there one? Right? You can discuss. Some people say there were a witch hunt. What is the evidence for that? What do you, in the Jim Driscoll situation, what do you, Jamie, like putting yourself in their shoes? What do you think, you know, what case could be made? You know, they don't want to discuss that. So they talk about all these other things that kind of only make sense if you're in that argument, either for or against it, but you are in the argument of which there is a witch hunt or there isn't a witch hunt. But they don't actually directly address that being what's happening.
Yeah, it's true. And it's really complicated. I mean, what you were saying made me think of, like, I saw Margaret Hodge apparently has said that the BDS, the anti-boycott bill, which is really an anti-BDS bill, an anti-Palestinian boycott, divestment, sanctions bill, she says it's a trap for Labour. And you're right, if you're saying that is a trap for Labour, then what are you saying about the IHRA definition and its acceptance? What are you saying about the, I guess, the EHRC recommendations and having to implement those? I mean, it's kind of, if you really, really look at it consistently, the narrative can't make sense because people have to admit the truth of certain aspects of it without really being able to follow through the implications because they're complicit in those other sections, like Margaret is. Well,
I'm glad I could bring some light-hearted comedy to your analysis.
Yeah, it's very comic. Yeah, I think people will be really rolling on the floor laughing right now. Yeah. So, wider implications. Let's just do some of that. We've done some of that, right?
Yeah. Well, my question, I guess, on that would be what do you see happening next? I mean, Lawson said himself, anyone could be next. Who's going to be next?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Once you've allowed a witch hunt to begin, it goes out of your control, right? And it affects the politics in a country for a very long time. And we can, like I said, I've been reading about McCarthyism. We can definitely see that there. That actually started not with McCarthy, but with so there was the Republicans, who are the right-wing party, right? They were really pushing this kind of anti-communist thing. And then the Democratic president, Truman, was really kind of worried about that. And he went all in on it. And he started loyalty hearings, whereby people who worked for the government were having to prove their loyalty. They were had up before committee. They were like, have you been to Communist Party meetings? Did you sell that newspaper? Did you read it? All of that. And he set that kind of precedent. It feels like really reminiscent of that. And then, of course, you've got McCarthyism riding in on that, the right coming in and saying, well, you know, this has happened. So it feels like this is now going to be taken up by the Conservative Party and really pushed.
Oh, I would think so. What if the Conservative Party come out and said, as some MPs said anything on this? Because they seem to just let Labour get on with it, I felt before. Although, I mean, they would throw it in Starmer's face that Corbyn was an anti-Semite and stuff, but they wouldn't get involved in the ongoing witch hunts.
The anti-boycott bill and the stuff around Ukraine seems to be embedding a kind of loyalty test in that kind of McCarthyite way. And hopefully I'm wrong about this, but the discussions around that are all about loyalty to UK foreign policy. That's what that anti-boycott bill is premised on. It's not that we shouldn't boycott places. It's just we should only boycott places in line with UK foreign policy. And if you don't, there's somehow something aberrant in that. You're undermining the country. And obviously it's only actionable against universities, local authorities. Individuals can't be sanctioned, but it could lead to that. So it could lead to, for example, local authorities like in the US getting people to sign something if they want government work to be contracted it. Teachers in schools having to sign things to say that they won't practice BDS.
It'd be quite difficult if you would say like a Palestinian sort of group that were looking to get state money. And one of the stipulations of getting state money was loyalty to Israel.
That point about Palestinians is really important, isn't it? Because all the way through, all the discussion about this bill and all the discussion about what's happened in the Labour Party is all about Jewish people and Jewish community and Israel. It's never about the fact there's loads of Palestinians who live in this country as well. There's Palestinian solidarity organizations in this country. The biggest one, I think, in the world, certainly the biggest one in Europe, is PSC, Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And there's Palestinians who are under assault every single day. And it's insane that that isn't part of the debate, that the Labour Party the Labour Party, Lisa Nandy did a long interview in Jewish News about the Labour position. And it was all about what Jewish communities want. Nothing, not a single mention of what Palestinian people in this country want.
Well, yeah, Jewish News. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, but the Labour front bench and stuff have so much time for these Jewish newspapers. It's amazing, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what else are the wider implications? It's kind of scary to think what Labour government will be like.
Yeah, well, I was thinking was, well, we just need to hold Labour to it, right? This is the new rule, and we should just do what they do, just dig up all of Mike Gapes's tweets, and just you can't win it one way, farcically campaign on the sort of side that the Labour leadership seem to be on, which is to penalise anyone who's ever said sort of anything remotely controversial, right? Which is, as we've talked about before, it is everybody. Everybody has said this stuff. Everybody's been on a platform with someone like Ken Loach, and all you got to do is find that moment and then just have some sort of large campaign. Obviously, it's not going to work. Mainstream media will ignore it. But maybe Owen Jones could get involved. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, you could. But I think it is certainly worth at least throwing these things out there so that they're publicly available. So when this does happen, people can throw in, well, actually, Alistair Campbell did the same thing. Tony Blair did the same thing. Luciana Burgess did the same thing. It's great they're getting rid of Neal Lawson, but it will mean that they'll have to get rid of half of their MPs, 20 people in the Labour HQ, 4 of Keir Starmer's personal team. It's like, just show how absurd it is that this is happening. You have to do a lot of research, which I'm not going to do, but if people are up for doing that.
But you can say like the Iraq war was just a fine thing, which is clearly a racist war and clearly based on criminal misrepresentation of what was actually happening on, in terms of weapons of mass destruction. But you can kind of still hold that was a just war in the Labour Party. But you can't say, I think anti-Semitism has been used to smear a few people.
Well, and equally, you can protest against the British government, Labour government's policy of going to war as it was happening and still be an MP for the Labour Party. Or you could have when it happened, right?
Yeah.
You openly defy government policy on the war, which now, say with Ukraine, you can't even mention, not that you have a different point of view, but even sort of questioning like our funding of weapons and stuff, like whether we should be spending X amount of money or whatever on these kind of things. There's just no debate now allowed.
Yeah.
Talking about a Labour government, it is kind of, it is more extreme, right, than we've seen from, well, any government, Labour or Tory, right? Because, okay, the Tory party might have harder policies, but they've always famously had crazy eccentrics on the backbenches that'll say all sorts. And it's interesting in the vote, right? It was the person who had the strongest line on it against the vote against the bill, the anti-boycott bill, was a Conservative MP.
There was a couple of Tory MPs who did I don't want to give them any kind of credit, but they did do it independently, did a decent job of arguing the contradictions in that bill. One around, why are you not making a distinction between the occupied territories and Israel, which I don't think the Labour front bench did. I haven't watched the debate, but that's what I'm told. And one of whom essentially said the two-state solution is dead. And again, something which isn't something that the Labour Party front bench is saying. But if you don't accept that there's a distinction between the occupied territories and Israel, then you essentially have said that two-state solution is dead. I mean, it's...
but that's it. You don't need to give them credit. I mean, the point of the matter is that it's embarrassing.
Yeah, it is embarrassing.
Crazy Tories that have the best sort of position or are allowed in their party to publicly say those positions and not be penalized for it, not, suddenly called into question whether they should be MPs anymore. Whereas in the Labour Party, we don't know what people really think. That's the thing. We have no idea. Don't know what black MPs think about racism. Can't say. Don't know what people think about Israel. Not allowed to talk about it. So yeah, who knows? Who knows what people in MPs in Labour? Maybe they had some really good takes, but they're unable to do. I mean, in there, it's like, again, it's where does the blame lie? Obviously, the leadership are terrible and they're stopping this kind of stuff. But as an MP, you can die by the sword, right? You can still say these things if you want, and things may happen. You may become an independent MP. You may end up losing your seat, but that's something that you might want to think, well, actually, it might be worth doing that. Who knows?
3 of them are already deselected. No, more than 3.
That's the thing. You may well.
You might as well make the most of it, right? Like the fact that they're not is like fucked up to me. I mean, why would you not just like say, I'm in Parliament for another year or so. Let's just like be honest, be open. Because I'm never getting a job in Labour Party again, which is the case for, Mick Whitley, I guess, Beth Winter, Sam Tarry. Yeah, it's disappointing. I don't know. Where do we end?
With a song and dance.
Song and dance, yeah, I can't do that. That'll be good, wouldn't it?
We haven't practiced.
No, we should sing Solidarity Forever or something.
We've said this before. Often when we do the podcast together, we sort of end on this somber note of despair. It often comes to that, but I guess that is just where it is. And as we often say, the only solace or whatever you can find is it is nice having these conversations, and it is great that your channel's doing so well, and there are people engaged in this stuff. There are people that are trying to understand this the way we're trying to understand it and actually talk about it. And just hopefully that will, I mean, the evidence isn't going away. It seems to be getting worse week by week. So it's just going to be one of those things where you would hope that eventually people will be forced to confront this in a very public way, and there'll be a larger conversation around it. I don't know how that happens or when, but I'm sure it'll be covered on your channel.
Yeah, so I'm reading this really great book on McCarthyism, and I'm going to put a link to it description. And I'm only about halfway through, so I haven't got to the bit where it all falls apart. I'm just at peak McCarthyism right now. So hopefully I'll get some clues from that. I'm going to end trying to be sort of semi-optimistic, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. People can judge. With a quote from that, because there was a guy called, what was his name? Trumbo, Dalton Trumbo. Yeah, so Dalton Trumbo was a communist, and he was a scriptwriter in Hollywood. He wrote some great films. He wrote Roman Holiday. He had to write it under a pseudonym because he was blacklisted at the time. So he got the Oscar for it, but he couldn't accept the Oscar. His mate did, who put his name on it instead. But he was one of these first people who was subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee. And he kind of wrote a really great piece about why liberals should defend the left. And hopefully, you never know, maybe Neal Lawson is watching this. Maybe he'll listen to these wise words from Mr. Trumbo. So he said, the legal principles which protect one against the force of the state protect all. If a communist comes first under attack and is overwhelmed, for communist re Corbynista, the breach opened by his fall or her fall or their fall becomes an avenue for the advance of the enemy with all their increased prestige upon you. You need not agree with the communists while you engage in their and your common defense. You may indeed oppose them with every honorable weapon in your arsenal, disassociate yourself from their theories and repudiate their final objectives, but defend them you must. For their defeat in the constitutional battle involves the overturn of principles which thus far have stood as our principal barrier, short of bloodshed, against fascism.
Can imagine Neal Lawson welling up, as he's wont to do, in his riverside flat and tasteful sweater.
What a great image to end on. Thank you for joining me. That was more fun than if I'd done it myself, which was very serious and very earnest. So
it was nice. Thank you for having me on. It's almost like we've got quite a good sort of back and forth relationship. It's been going on for ages.
Yeah, it's weird that, right?
Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
We should do this more often.
We should. And if you don't check out Daniel's channel already, you obviously should, because he's very good and I'm on there sometimes. So if you like my content on here, you'll probably like some of that content as well. It's got the same vibe, I'd say, whether I'm on there or not.
Yeah, I guess so. And all the podcast itself.
Yeah, we actually have a proper actual podcast. So links in the description, and yeah, so I seem to be doing more and more of these videos. So I'm sure that hopefully I'll see everyone who's watching at the next one. Thanks for watching, and hope this cheered you up a little bit.
Me? Yeah, I guess so. I was thinking, are we going to do a wave? But we're not on the podcast.
No, I don't do waves. Yeah, no.
This is a serious Heather podcast. I don't know how you end them. I'm cheered up, Heather.
Okay, I'm gonna end with that.